everyone. I'm Rob May. I'm the CEO of Neurometric.
And I'm Cooper, COO at Neurometric. We're co-founders, and this is Inference Time Tactics.
Today, we have two guests on the program. Our CTO, Byron, who occasionally joins us on some of these. And then our guest of the week is Shawn Rogers. Shawn is the CEO of BARC US, one of the top analysts studying how companies actually deliver AI and generative AI in production. They have a new research report out called Lessons from the Leading Edge, which analyzes more than 400 organizations to understand what's really working and what's not in the enterprise transformation. So when you hear these media reports about AI is not working, AI is working, we have a survey today that's going to get at some of the truth. So Shawn, thanks for joining us. And can you give the listeners a quick sense of sort of who you are and why you decided to do this survey?
Sure. As you mentioned, I'm Shawn Rogers. I'm the CEO of BARC here in the US. We're a global analyst firm. We're led by research first. So as any good analyst, I have a lot of tenured opinions about our industry, but it's a lot of fun to tie those opinions and that experience with actual data from end users. This particular piece of research we're going to talk about a little bit today, brand new, fresh data, 60 days old. So in the world of AI, that's only a year old, maybe, the way time is moving. And we're building off of a previous piece of research that we delivered in March of 2024. So really what we were focusing on wasn't what people were planning or thinking about doing or were setting strategy for. We talked to people who are deploying projects. And so I think that adds a certain amount of weight to these 420 some odd respondents and the insights they gave us. So yeah, global research firm specializing in data analytics and AI. And as I said, we're research driven, so we tend to enter the market on things with research in front of us.
Yeah, 2024 seems like a lifetime ago. Your recent report shows dramatic shifts in where AI projects struggle. What are you seeing?
You know, I think there's two camps out there trying to do AI right now. The ones that are being systematic and focused on foundational things that help them succeed. And then there's the rest of us, the other 80% that are running around because their bosses told them to get something with AI in it together to make the board happy. And I think that it's a little different than when we all lived through, like, say, the big data disruption of a bunch of years back. That wasn't so driven by the C-suite or the board. AI certainly is. The board is involved. The C-suite is the sponsor. IT has taken a slightly back seat to this because they're not driving all of that innovation. And so the pressure in that, what's that acronym? FOMO? Fear of missing out is real, man. I mean, it's real. When I talk to end users, there's this immediate question of, oh my God, where do we start? We feel so far behind. Did we miss everything already? And yeah, there's a level of hysterics and chaos around AI right now.
And so when a CEO turns to their executive team and says, let's do something about AI, who do they turn to?
You know, I think they turn to in-house experts. They turn to the people that are running their different lines of businesses. So if you're, kind of a standard enterprise company, you're probably hearing a lot of requests from your marketing group. You may be hearing requests from the office of the CFO. And of course, IT is on your doorstep saying, hey, we should do this. We need to do that. We need to get ready here and there. I hear a little bit of sarcasm from some of the end users we speak to that have quickly learned over the last 2 years. If you want to get a project approved, just put the word AI in the project title and you get it rubber stamped. Because in our research has shown that about 36% of boards across the United States, North America, have extra money that they've parsed out for their companies, right? To say, look, if you can show us what you're going to do and it's worthy or will deliver value, we've got extra budget. So normally the board of directors is not super warm and friendly about, more money. But right now in the world of AI, I think that's true. Byron's laughing because he knows. So, yeah.
Yeah, and your research had some interesting insight into how people are partnering with internal IT versus consultants.
Yeah, that's a good data point. So I'll walk you through it quickly. So most of us in an enterprise situation, we would talk to IT because we want to innovate and do something new, and we want to do AI. So we go to these internal partners, and so we asked all 420 folks who was their favorite resource, and internal IT came in number one, and I did not find that to be all that prophetic or surprising. The other ones on that list might include GSIs or regional consultancies, existing vendors that you have a great and trusted relationship with, and even some customers who were kind of placing some bets on new AI vendors to help show them the way. So the first part of this was couched in the idea of when you are deploying, who is your best resource? And huge number came back and said, yeah, internal IT. Okay. And then we followed up with another question that looked at, how happy are you with your partners? And the coin flipped. Internal IT came in last on the we're happy or we're satisfied with our partner. And it was overtaken really quickly by third parties. Regional consultancies came in first, and GSIs came in second. And then the vendors, either trusted existing or brand new, came in after that. So IT was at the bottom. And then the last compelling thing we saw is of the 420 folks we're talking to that are deploying, we asked them how many projects they had deployed and where they were at in that rhythm. And we're able to see some correlation that as people do more projects, they're stepping away from IT more and more as they progress. I wish I could tell you, because you're going to ask me, well, why did they do that? And I don't have that empirical answer today, because we didn't know that was going to happen. So we didn't ask the next question. And we will ask that in our next research, which will be, okay, why are you unsatisfied? Was it you felt curtailed or handcuffed by governance and rules and data access and orchestration, or what was the dissatisfaction? But it's pretty clear people who are deploying, who are actively doing AI projects, they started with IT, they're separating as they move forward, and they're not super satisfied with them as a partner. And I look forward to visiting with you guys again in a year after I know the answer as to why.
Absolutely. And anecdotally, I know, Rob, you talk a lot about this AI sophisticated enterprises versus not. I know Shawn's research distinguishes between leaders and non-leaders. Rob, do you want to share a little bit more about what we're seeing and maybe add context there?
It's really interesting when you think about AI deployments, because when you run a business where you sell something, most of the time you have some kind of demographic that you sell to. And so you look at companies and you're like, oh, we sell to insurance companies, or we sell to growth stage companies, or, you sell to companies of a certain size, small businesses, Fortune 500, whatever. What we have seen with AI is that AI maturity is what matters, and it cuts across all these things. So we have not seen, there's no answer like Fortune 100 companies are super AI mature and everybody else is not, or vice versa. It's like the companies that were fortunate to have people and cultures that allowed them to adopt AI early on have learned, and now they're moving forward and they're adopting tools and design patterns and things that are far beyond sort of where everybody else is. And it's really, really interesting to see. It makes marketing for early stage companies and new markets a little bit challenging, but it's good, and it ties back to the news media, right? That you hear, which is all these projects are failing, blah blah blah. Well, they're not at the AI maturity companies, because they already went through the failure phase, which was like, let's not call it the failure phase, let's call it the learning phase. They learned how to implement these things, and so there's a lot of companies that we've spoken to that are having quite a bit of success.
I'll touch on that topic again, and I'll try to rattle through it real quick. But we don't ask our participants, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how mature are you? That's not how we do this. So we have 7 areas that we measure these foundational success rates, and I'll just list them quickly. So it's data access and use policies, security standards and compliance, legal considerations, enterprise architectural requirements, project governance and oversight, AI program standards and policies, and lastly, identifying AI leadership within your organization and your partners. So all 7 of those, to be seen as what we call an AI leader, you have to be fully deployed or in your final steps on all 7 of those for us to consider you a leader. And it's odd. So the first time I asked this maturity question was nearly 18 months ago. And that group came back around 20%-ish of the respondents was, hey, look at that. And actually, when we got the answers, we didn't believe them like good researchers should. We vetted those answers, and we saw very clearly in our data from 18 months ago that these people were doing things differently. We have since asked this question on 4 global research projects for AI here at BARC, the last and most recent one being this one you and I are talking about today. And the number's not changing, which is interesting. I would have fully expected over an 18-month period that maturity would slowly be ramping up in the right direction, right? It makes sense. And what we're starting to have clarity on is that there's 80% of companies are just going to do AI because they need to go do AI, and they're excited to do AI. And so, they're doing it without the foundational things. And then there's this 20% that's doing it with the foundation. One of the first things the 20% showed us was they had a different challenge around things that concern them. And I know that we had planned, and we will get to the question of cost of AI at some point during our conversation, but that surfaced amongst the leaders as one of their biggest concerns. And they're getting surprised right now by software costs and people costs and training and so on. So leaders have already moved on from the simple challenges, and they've moved quicker. And also what we see is leaders are getting about twice as many projects done. So if you build the foundation, you get to do more AI, if that makes sense.
And twice as many projects, wasn't it like 5 projects in production or 10? It's significant.
Yeah. And actually, we measured that twice as many leaders had at least 5 projects in production, and the number was even greater if you looked at leaders who had 10. So once again, if you focus on those 7 areas that I rattled off before, you're going to get more AI delivered in your organization. And I think that's a great takeaway to come back with for people that listen to our conversation, that, you're going to have hysterical board members and executives pounding the desk going, when's our AI chatbot going to be ready? And that may not be your most important concern. Building a foundation for AI, I think, is your number 1 tactic or strategy. And I highly recommend it to all of BARC customers when they ask us what they need to do.
And do you have a sense of the scope or the impact of these projects that are in deployment?
So are you asking from a use case standpoint or like business value standpoint?
Both. Like how impactful are these projects?
Much more so than we would have expected. So we see the use cases split into 2 groups: general AI use cases. I just made fun of one, AI chatbots, and I only made fun of it because it's where everybody starts. And then we're seeing leaders really focus on more industry specific and more higher ROI projects that are inherent to their business. So healthcare companies are doing a lot of work around healthcare record management and people management use cases, where the financial side of the world, banking and financial services, are obviously still very worried about risk and fraud, but they already had solutions in place for that, and now they're augmenting those solutions with better insights, more automated actions through AI. So business impact is certainly real. I know that we referenced a report that was hysterically popular for a minute in the AI space a few weeks back or a month ago. And they focused really heavily on ROI. And I think that there's a lot more work to be done there. I think that the research that was mentioned, I think came up a little short in how they were measuring ROI. BARC has an ROI study in the pipeline. You'll see it in 2026, early in the year. So, because that's a hard nut to crack. But yeah, the business benefits are many, and they're different depending upon where the AI application is sitting and who it's serving. So,
kind of to just kind of tack on that, would you say, again, maybe asking you to speculate a little bit since you don't have the hard data, but it sounds like the companies that have gone into this with an understanding of AI as being a limited but useful technology and figuring out and identifying tasks where they can leverage those automation capabilities have maybe been more successful than the ones that are, as you sort of said, are like, we need AI. What do we throw AI at? Oh, it's good for summarization. It's good for chatbots. And as someone who's spent a lot of time, dealing with that space in the past, it's very, very hard. So I do wonder if it's that kind of like ability to identify tasks and be focused is what has helped the ones that have succeeded.
Yeah, I think as analysts and vendors and solution providers, we're always a couple of steps ahead of our customers and our audience, which is where we need to be. I think that that's really important. I got to be honest with you. I am still helping users understand what RAG stands for and what MCP stands for. And why those things are important. And I'm not being sarcastic to end users. It is our job to be a little ahead of them to help. That's the service we all provide. But we're still in the early stages here. I made that joke about FOMO up front. Take a deep breath, man. The train has not left the station. There is so much opportunity and work to do around AI. But I think that, to your point, Byron, financial services and other places that were early adopters of machine learning and early AI practices before Agentic and ChatGPT and Gen AI arrived on the scene. These are enterprises that already saw great value in advanced analytics through machine learning models, algorithms, and such. So that's why they're augmenting what they have. They're like, we already know this is valuable to our company, but if we could make it 10% smarter, we're going to. And that's, again, goes back to we already had a foundation for AI in place. We know how to deal with this. I get briefed as an analyst, and briefings are when software companies want to tell me what they're up to. And I was on a call recently where there was 45 analysts on the call and 25 AI note takers, and which is becoming really common. We don't have any in our call today. But the person that was helping with the call asked, or didn't really ask, informed the room that if you brought a note taker with you, that's great. We're going to kick the note taker out right now because they're going to make an NDA announcement about their platform. And they can't have that NDA announcement inside of public models. And a lot of the note takers are attached to public model. So that there was a policy issue for this particular vendor, but a lot of end users don't get these subtleties right now. And so again, the foundational stuff remains important for sure. And I want to come back to the question about business impact a little bit, because we did measure some things about what people expected it to be and where they actually have now since found it. And the top two were around customer satisfaction as a measurement for their projects being successful, and also the impact of cost. Is critical, and I've mentioned that here today. Both of them were much more important to our respondents than they expected, because we asked the same questions from our 2024 study through our 25. So it's a bit longitudinal in its approach. So it's fun to see where people thought things were going to land and where things actually landed. And customer satisfaction and cost are two that landed number one and number two and were more important than they expected.
And so continuing on that cost theme, any data points from the survey that you want to highlight?
Yeah. We asked everybody, which are your big issues? And if they said cost, we branched them down to another question because we did want to ask a little bit more. And we said, hey, where did you get impacted in an unexpected way? And the big top three in unexpected were software costs, validation and quality control costs, people, salaries, and training. And I'll actually include a fourth, which was infrastructure or cloud as well. So those were the four big costs that surprised people. If I'm looking at the data, 51% of our respondents said, hey, we were surprised by the cost. We had planned for a cost, but it was more than we expected. 45% said, yeah, it was right around where we expected. So, we're talking 96% were either more than they wanted it to be or right about where they wanted it to be as a cost concern. So people that are doing AI projects understand that cost is sort of the new problem. And you're hearing it at the big events and from solution providers that are starting to talk about large models versus small models and the cost impact thereof. You're starting to hear about token management, thresholding, almost like AI ops, kind of like cloud ops in a way, understanding the costs of these things. I'm already hearing fun horror story. Well, it's fun for me, but not for the people. But people that are sending agentic workflows on a Friday afternoon and coming back on Monday and finding out that they spent 20 grand over the weekend trying to have some agents do some things for them. So the lessons learned was a great title for this one around because it's fun to watch what everybody's doing. So, but yeah, I hope that answers your cost question. And we're asking them about how they're mitigating it as well. Like, okay, so we know software and people are big problems. How are you mitigating that? And they are starting to look closer at limiting the scope of their projects and focusing more, and they're phasing their delivery. And that seems to be helping. And the third biggest mitigation piece is service providers from the outside coming in and helping them execute better.
Wow. And so switching topics a little bit, you warned that organizations may be prioritizing short-term delivery over long-term responsible AI considerations.
Yep.
What's the context there? Why? What do you mean by that?
Well, I think it goes back to my tongue-in-cheek thing earlier, right? Everybody feels the pressure. You walk down the hallways at work, CEO looks at you and goes, how are those AI projects coming? When are we going to deliver? That stuff didn't happen to us before. That wasn't something that occurred. So this fear of missing out and a little bit of hysteria. I've been in the business a long time. I used to answer questions of execs about Hadoop during the big data days. And, the response was, yeah, I heard of that. I guess we need to be doing it. We're going to make sure we have a big Hadoop and make sure it's purple because that's the color of our brand. I had these conversations and I have a good audience in Byron today. But that was the takeaway. Now the pressure is very different to deliver these projects. And I think it's causing people to get away from things like what I would call responsible AI. So if you think about responsible AI as a topic, usually responsible AI is a company's internal prioritization of what they want to do with AI, right? Like, what are our borders? What box are we going to play in? How far are we going to go down the road to doing certain things? And we found that in 24, one of the top plans, if not the top plan, if I remember correctly, I think it was number 2, honestly, was data privacy. So in 24, everybody thought that they were going to be prioritizing data privacy. In 25, once they started to deliver projects, that number jumped from 32 to 56% of the people deploying had a moment. Somewhere along their little journey to those first projects, they went, data privacy is going to be a thing. And they probably pumped their brakes a little bit and went back to that list of 7 and made sure that they were aligned to make sure that they could go forward without getting in trouble. One of the biggest backwards moving trends that we saw around the responsible AI side, 36% of the respondents in 2024 said, hey, we're really concerned and we're prioritizing human in the loop, which sounds very safe and smart. That one dropped to 21% because I think people who are deploying started seeing the beauty of automation without humans. And that's a double-edged sword. And it's my belief that you have to look at how fast a process is moving and what data it's utilizing and the decisions it's making before you pull humans out of it. And so sometimes the speed of things are so quick, you couldn't possibly send an email to a domain expert and ask them to interject in the agentic workflow. So you have to let them run. So companies are going to do a lot of work around what should we automate, what shouldn't we automate, where do the humans need to live. But in a year, humans in the loop dropped significantly from 36%, which is what they were planning, all the way down to 21. So apparently the people who are deploying are enjoying automation.
Wow. So speaking of humans in the loop, like what are you seeing around AI skills gaps and anything in the data there?
Yeah, well, the initial big concern from everybody, not just I'm looking at it holistically. That was one of the first big concerns was how do I find people with AI backgrounds, people who understand the technology that underlies. For any of us, I mean, how many of you wake up each day and read that there's a new number 1 LLM in the world? I mean, it's hard to keep track, man. I mean, and firms like mine are making decisions about do we want to track LLMs? And actually, BARC has decided we don't. We know which LLMs are the most popular, but we're not going to be the analyst firm that you come to sift through the 400,000 LLM models that are available out there in the open source world. I do think that it's going to be a difficult thing for companies to keep pace with the changes in the industry. I feel the most challenged I have in 30 years to keep pace with the technology because it's moving at lightning speed. I made the joke earlier that the data was very brand new and that meant it was only 2 years old in AI time. It's like the dog years for AI stuff is ridiculous right now.
Well, it's funny because as you mentioned, you were at AWS reInvent. I just came back from NeurIPS, and that's most of the work presented there had to have been done and submitted back in May. So you're seeing stuff that is like 9 months old, and maybe you missed it because it's so easy to miss things. But you can kind of see where trends and things are moving. Actually, I want to go back to something that we're talking about, humans and how deployments are happening. And one of the I don't know if this came across in some of your conversations, but I'm curious what, speaking of data privacy, that, back in the big data era, you didn't really have to worry about your end users bringing their own Spark cluster or Hadoop cluster, but you absolutely have to deal with end users bringing their own agents today. And so I'm curious if that kind of conversation or the data security InfoSec policy side of the world had come up in some of your conversations.
So the span of conversations we're having about agentic AI are very interesting. They begin with the simple, what is an agent? Can you help us define it? What agents should we go deploy? And those are people that are definitely at the lower end of that 80%. They're playing catch up. They're a little late to the game. I was on a call recently with a leading global bank, and we were on the topic of agentic AI. And I asked, how many agents do you think you have in the wild? And have you been able to do some form of audit or tracking or anything? And he said, yeah, we think we have 20,000. And I went, I'm sorry, what? Did you say 2,000? And he said, no, I said 20,000 agents. And they're running on all different public platforms and interfaces. Some of them are kind of close to being blessed by an IT organization. Others are just over there on that platform. And he was candid and he said that a lot of the agents were maybe simple code snippets or small code processes and things like that. But the bottom line is agentic AI is already out of the bag. Trust frameworks are one of the most important things that companies are adding to their technical mix. And to our point about how fast things move, we've kind of been joking about the age of information and the age of how you look at things. I mentioned that this particular piece of research was longitudinal in effect. So I asked a lot of the same questions in 25 that I asked back at the end of 23. We published again in March of 24. I had to add 3 different new technologies to our questions. So my technology question didn't stay purely longitudinal because the word MCP did not exist when I did my survey 18 months ago when we delivered it. Data lineage and observability and data monitoring was certainly a tech that was around, but it hadn't really surfaced and how incredibly important it is for AI. So we added that one as well. And then lastly, trust frameworks became a big thing that we added to our technical question. And here's what we found. 33% of the people that are deploying AI have data lineage and observability already in place. 26% of them are in POC and testing on that. So over 50% of people feel that this is a necessary complement to their tech stack. On the other things, data trust frameworks, 26% of our respondents have them already in deployment, in production, and another 22% are testing and in POC. And lastly, MCP, that thing that we all hear about every morning now that made RAG disappear into the sunset like it's not being used anymore. When MCP is like the hot new bright shiny balloon of AI, only 20% are using MCP servers to build better apps and for the functionality in their systems. So that one will continue to grow. So,
and also saw some stuff in the report about small language models.
Yeah, well, that's tied to cost, right? I mean, it's tied to cost. I think it's tied to versatility. Context is a huge part of small language or domain specific models. We talked about or asked about those when we did our initial work in 24. They were part of people's strategies and the landscape changed quite a bit. So for instance, as far as companies that are planning to use coding models, for instance, specialty coding models, it was really high in 24. 39% of our respondents said, yep, we're planning to do that. In the end, 27% of them deployed them and are using them, which was smaller than we expected because we believe coding is a great place to apply this technology. Finance continues to be the biggest, hottest area of expectation from a planning perspective, but also from an executions perspective. 42% of the companies that have deployed models in our survey or deployed AI in our survey are using small language models for finance. And some of the other ones that are leading are things like insurance and medical and science and biomedical. And I believe strongly, part opinion and part data, we will live in an environment where all enterprises will have hundreds of models. And I do think eventually we will have micro models attached to agentic workflows. So agents will specifically speak to the model for the task that they're trying to work on. So if you were at the big event I was at last week, the head of AWS reInvent may have used the word billions and billions of agents. And I can't say that I disagreed with it.
Yeah, we're laser focused on that world of multi-models, small language models in the mix. Byron, Rob, you want to kind of double click there? Add some more context from our perspective?
I actually have a question because you're definitely looking at it, and I do think that the task is how do you figure out how to make those small models? Because that's also not a trivial process. There's many, many techniques. There's many, many models that you can use as a base model if you're not going to find, full train your own. There's always data challenges of like how much data do you need to get good, effective small models for tasks. In your surveys, Shawn, did they talk about, in cases where people talked about small models, did they indicate which family of models they were basing them on, or did they just sort of say they were using them?
We're able to couple a little of that because we do ask all the respondents about which models are primary in their environment or what your top 3 LLMs are. And then we dive down into, are you using smaller domain level models, and then which groups? So we will, in our next survey, ask specifically about those models. It's hard to do because in a research question, open text is kind of a no-no. You don't say, hey, which small language models are you using? You end up getting a list of hundreds and hundreds. It's problematic to try to even identify the leaders right now because, as I mentioned earlier, every morning we all wake up and a different model and the LLM side is leading the parade. The same thing is happening in the small and domain level model. But I think from companies like yours, the ability to allow your customers to experiment, the ability for the customers to see the performance, accuracy, and cost impact of working with these models, this is going to be where you're going to intersect with the most sophisticated users. They're going to want to start to play the game of let's A/B split this agent's workflow and see where it performs better and which small model. And then some dedication will be made to those models. But then, Byron, to your question, do you think they'll tell us? Because once they find those really small models that really work well and have great context, and they've ragged the living daylights out of them, and now they have a lot of enterprise context, and now they've become somewhat deterministic in their outputs, and they're kind of pretty damn accurate, that's going to become IP. You're not going to want your competitors to know which models you're using.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's definitely going to be the case, that you're going to not want to disclose your proprietary infrastructure. I will say, kind of as a high level thing from NeurIPS, just what seeing people are doing. Qwen, people seem to really like the Qwen 3 series of models. You know, there's a lot of SLM fine tuning happening there. The Llama 3 models are still very much in use, but you know, it's also very fascinating, right? Because these big companies are providing their tiny models for fine tuning, and you know, via the distillation of the big models. But there's so many choices. You said, like, how many models, you know, and no one has the time to try to figure all this stuff out, which is again where we're trying to help people.
Yeah, well, then the research helps, you know. So Llama came in, the Llama family of models, including the large models and so on, came in number 6 on our popularity chart, and it grew from 2024. So about 11% of the people that were taking our research in 2024 expected to use Llama. It turned out that it was 16%. So to your point of families of models, that model group was doing quite well. Anthropic is doing great for a lot of obvious reasons. It has great output capabilities around coding and Gen AI. Gemini, it climbed a lot faster than we expected. They were in the plans for people, their family of models. 29% of our respondents had planned on using it. 36 actually did, 36%. So a sizable jump. The top answer in the bigger family category was certainly OpenAI, GPT models. I look at that with a little bit of I made my researcher face, because everybody checks chat. Well, yeah, I use that one. You know, so I think that group, 72% of the people that took our survey said that was primary in their strategy of families of models. But your commentary was around specific small models. And I think the next time we have a chat like this, we'll be talking small models, and then we'll be talking micro models, because it's going to happen. And agentic AI is going to these workflows are going to work quicker. It's almost like the adage of, hey, you shouldn't bring your data to the middle to analyze it. You should send your models to the edge so that the compute and the analyzation is happening close to the data. It's going to be the same way with agentic. Agents are going to want the model right there. They want to reinforce it. They want to learn from it. They want to feed back to it. And then it'll become the job of companies to figure out how to manage billions and billions of agents. So, yeah.
And with that complexity, it seems to mirror something we're seeing, that enterprises aren't just leveraging one model or one family of models from one provider.
Yeah.
In your research, you're seeing people leverage multiple providers, or any data points there?
Yeah, I think once again, some of it's being driven by accuracy, speed, and dollars. Some of it's being driven by what big ecosystem are you tied to, right? Are you a GCP user? Are you an Azure user? Are you AWS? There is certain patterns that we can see in the data that if you're part of those hyperscaler ecosystems, I mean, they're trying to provide the easiest, fastest on-ramp for you to do things. Now, again, the event I was at last week, the announcement of several new models was made, which is pretty customary at this point. So the use of those families of models won't change much, because some companies get very locked in to those environments, and they get locked in because these guys make it easy, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I will tell you that it can often be a lot more expensive. And I think, we all know that. With ease of use and lack of complication, perhaps comes a little bit higher price tag. So
lots of interesting insights. The research concludes with a series of recommendations.
Yes, and I'm cheating, if you don't mind. I'm going to bring up my recommendations over here to make sure that I remember my big ones. But yeah, I think it's important to take this kind of information and to be able to apply it in the workplace, and to be able to do smart stuff with it. So my takeaways for you is visit your cost estimates. They're probably a little short of what you're going to actually end up spending. Make sure you have a buffer there, or at least make sure your shareholders, stakeholders in these projects understand that there could be volatility there. Data quality has become the biggest challenge to successful AI. In 24, when we asked people about data quality, they ranked it in the middle of the pack in expected challenges at 19%. Listed it as an expected challenge. Here, now that we're watching people actually do AI and deploy, it jumped to the #1 challenge amongst all of your peers to do AI. 44% of the people that we survey ranked it #1. So it's a great recommendation to take away from lessons from the leading edge. Cost is an issue. Data quality is going to be a challenge, and if you have ignored your data quality, you're going to pay a little bit of a price for it. The last two recommendations, IT should still probably be part of what you're doing, but expect to get a little frustrated there. It's probably wise to look outside the walls of your business to get a little third-party help to innovate and to move a little quicker, but I do not recommend excluding them. You will make problems. Those problems will be costly, and barriers to data will happen pretty quick. And then I think, last but not least, my recommendation is to hit rewind, go back to when I listed all 7 of those things that are foundational that leaders are doing. We thought leaders were doing better. I now know they are. They're deploying more projects. They have a higher success rate. They're deploying projects in a faster cadence. So investing in those 7 maturity foundational steps is the key to successful AI. And if you've read some of that research that said, hey, ROI and failure rates are bad and so on, I got news for you. That's why. And you won't be able to fix your AI practice until you pump your brakes and fix the foundation to it. And I feel strongly about that, but it's not just my opinion. The data proves it now.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Fail to plan to fail. Byron, Rob, anything else you want to touch on before we wrap?
No, I think that was great.
Cool. Thanks, Shawn. We appreciate you joining us today. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. We'll link the research in the show notes. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. And thanks for joining us at Inference Time Tactics.